Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the channel, and I'm back today to continue my Friday the 13th franchise review. And today I'm going to be talking about not only Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, but in my opinion, the very best Friday the 13th movie out of the entire series. As people may or may not remember, Friday the 13th Part 5 was to be pushed as Tommy Jarvis being the killer in Part 6, and because Part 5 went over so poorly, the plans to have Tommy Jarvis be the new Jason was completely scrapped, and they brought back Jason Voorhees in this movie. The beginning of the movie, we see Tommy Jarvis and a friend go to dig Jason's grave up, which ends up being a complete disaster because lightning strikes Jason's grave twice, reviving him, bringing him back, and he sets his sights on going back to Camp Crystal Lake. Crystal Lake has basically been renamed Camp Forest Green, and the town of Crystal Lake is basically trying to get away from the bad history of Jason Voorhees and his mother. And Jason, similar to the previous movies, makes his way back to the camp, and they're actually having a bunch of people there in terms of kids visiting, and the camp counselors all start getting slaughtered by Jason, and Tommy Jarvis must try to get back to the camp to send Jason to hell once and for all. And in the beginning of the movie, when Tommy wanted to send Jason to hell by burning his corpse, that ended up being a complete disaster. And Jason really has methodically started making his way back to the camp, killing people along the way. Jason was played by C.J. Graham in this movie, and I think he was the most menacing stuntman to play Jason at the time. There actually was an idea that the actress who played Pam in the previous movie wanted to reprise the role in Part 6, but they wanted to completely do a different story away from that. Part 5 was really ignored in this movie, you could tell. They did mention Tommy was already out of the institution, and Tommy is now played by Tom Matthews. It turns out that John Shepard was asked to reprise the role of Tommy from Part 5, and he chose not to because of religious differences. So he said no, and they recasted him with Tom Matthews, who everybody remembers from Return of the Living Dead. And he basically is a more older, wiser Tommy, but he's more emotional, but he's not really an angry guy anymore like he was in Part 5. And Tommy is also befriending somebody that actually is the daughter of the sheriff of Crystal Lake, who Tommy ends up having a conflict with. And Sheriff Garrett's daughter, Megan, is somebody that takes a liking to Tommy, and she tries to help him go back to Crystal Lake to stop Jason and warn people. But by the time they get there, there's already massive casualties. And this movie really was a suspenseful movie, even more than the previous ones. You could feel the urgency when Tommy is driving back to Camp Crystal Lake and he says, "I've already got a bad feeling it's too late." And he sets up a plan to lower Jason into the lake and chain him to the bottom of Camp Crystal Lake, which actually ends up having a disastrous result because Tommy nearly gets killed, and Megan, she ends up ramming these boat propellers right into Jason's neck, and he's unconscious under the water and chained to the bottom of Crystal Lake. And this movie was so gothic, and it had some of the best kills ever. My favorite kill in this movie was the triple decapitation scene, the paintball scene where the three people are actually basically walking, and then they hear a noise, and then Jason just pops out from above the tree and just takes one swipe and just takes three heads off at once. It was such a cool but gruesome scene. And there was some comedy in this movie. Like, you see this older guy in the paintball scene. He walks up and he shoots Jason with a paintball and he just brushes it off. And then the guy just runs off into the woods, and you find him later on and he's just ripped to pieces. This movie also had some really good music from Alice Cooper, Man Behind the Mask, and Teenage Frankenstein. Very, very 80s like music, but it just made this movie more fantastic. This movie was without a doubt the best Friday the 13th. It still is my favorite Friday the 13th movie ever in terms of Jason Voorhees. Um, I think it was a great concept to bring Jason back in this. He's a zombie. He's not the human deformed killer that feels pain. Like in this, you got to go to levels to really even stun Jason. I mean, he's now taking gunshots. He basically got hit in the head with a log. I mean, he just brushed all this stuff off and kept coming. And I think this was a great direction from Paramount and the director in this movie to make Jason more intense and more of a threat, that he's not your typical killer that's going to just fall to the ground and hold his arm and leg. He's somebody that can take punishment and just keep coming. Um, this movie really had also one of the most annoying characters that I ever saw that I couldn't stand. That annoying deputy that had it out for Tommy. Like the scene where they arrest Tommy in the graveyard because he wants to show the sheriff that Jason's not in his grave. And then the guy pulls his gun out, frees it, psycho. And the sheriff's like, "You made my deputy draw his revolver. He's been dying to try out this laser sighted feature on the gun." And he was being an asshole to Tommy because Tommy was getting along with Megan, who I guess that deputy had kind of a crush on. Um, he was very, very annoying. He tried to come off as like a tough guy, but he was probably the one character I wanted to see get killed by Jason, but his character actually just gets locked in a jail cell and we don't see him ever again. Um, Overall, this movie was just fantastic. I applaud the director of this to make Jason more torn up. He's more gothic in this movie. The film was more gothic, but he's more of a zombie, and I love the dark tone of this movie that really was just needed. I mean, the previous ones were dark, but this movie went to another level of gothic, and I just feel like it was a great touch. This movie gets 5 out of 5 stars. It's that good of a film, and it was my favorite one. It still is. Did you guys like it? Tell me what you thought about it in the comment section. Comment down below. Hit the subscribe button. On the road to 100 subscribers. Thanks again for watching. Plenty more to come.